Hello friends, Namaskar. Today on 15th July 2026, I would like to discuss the last day in the life of the great American President Abraham Lincoln. The last evening in his life, the last night rather, he was shot dead at night while watching a play called Our American Cousin. It was sort of a comedy that he was watching, and the American Civil War had just ended in the victory of the Union led by Abraham Lincoln. And the 11 Confederate states, the southern states, were defeated in the American Civil War that reigned from 1861 to 1865. So, the victory was recently won at a very heavy cost. About 7 to 8 lakh Americans, by a rough estimate, lost their life in this great great civil war, which was led by Abraham Lincoln on the Union side. Well, uh, while the war was still going on, the southern states, the Confederate states, once in 1863, they hatched a plan to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, and for which they brought out an advertisement in which they sought uh, sought money from people of southern states to finance the assassination of the president. Well, this evil plan of killing the head of the northern states, Abraham Lincoln, the elected president, was hatched in 1863, but uh, on a cold January night at 10:10 in 1865, 2 years later, that Abraham Lincoln, was shot dead by a very ordinary actor, John Wilkes Booth. And the motive, is very strange, ludicrous, laughable, petty, and mean. John Wilkes Booth was a good actor, but not a very good actor. Of course, his father, Junius Brutus Booth, was the most celebrated actor of his time for about 30 years, the father of the assassin of Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth. The father, Junius Brutus Booth, was a very good actor. He was the best of his time. For 30 years, he ruled the American stage like a king. And he wanted his son to become uh, the greatest actor of his time. And from his very childhood, from the very childhood of his son, John Wilkes Booth, he just drilled into his head that he was going to be the best in his profession, that is in acting. But you see, destiny had other plans, and it is not the wish of a father that destiny grants, but destiny has its own plan for every human being. And it turned out that his son became a good actor, but not a superbly good actor. So he was good, he was appreciated, he was very handsome, but he was a good actor, but he was not the best. And this galled him. He did not like it because inside he wanted to be famous. In his mind, he had planned to be among the best, but he could not. He was, in fact, hissed off the stage. He was hooted by the audience, and the New York people, the New York theater didn't like him. So he wanted to be famous, and for that he has the conspiracy. He conscripted about 10 very idiotic type of people to kidnap the president and take him to the southern part of his country and to make the Union states surrender to the plans of the South. That by kidnapping the president, Abraham Lincoln, he would win the war for the southern states. That was his plan. But unfortunately, in 1865, the war ended and he had to change his plan. So instead of kidnapping him and taking away on a horse-drawn coach to the southern states, he just wanted to assassinate the president just to become famous. So the motive was strange. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to kill the president of America just because he could not become a very good actor. So this was madness, sheer madness, and only a madman can act like this. So he conspired and he bribed the stage people and he came near the president and he shot just beneath the, he put the trigger of his pistol just beneath the left ear of the president while he was watching a play, and the time was 10:10 at night, and he pulled the trigger. The bullet that was fired just below the left ear, it pierced his brain and it got stuck in his head just below the right eye. So Lincoln did not die instantly. His head first came down in front, then his head just went down, he just slumped to his side, and then Lincoln slumped in his box chair, which was decorated very nicely by the stage people. So there was a lot of confusion in the hall. People, I mean, created a lot of noise when they came to realize the magnanimity of the situation. John Wilkes Booth managed to fly away and he kept hiding from place to place. And about thousands of spies and soldiers were hunting for him. And after a long search, he was caught and he was put to death. So, the President of America was shot dead by a madman who was seeking fame, and his motive was not political. He did not care much for politics, and neither he was interested in winning a bounty, winning a prize for killing the president. So, namaskar, friends. I read a poem long back written by a great poet, American poet Walt Whitman. I was a student of class 11 when this great poem, "O Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman was taught by my own father. I was spellbound by the emotional force, by the dramatic narrative, and by the prolonged metaphor that presents the then history of America. The poet Walt Whitman, in his great elegiac poem, it's an elegy because it mourns the death. This poem, "O Captain, My Captain," you should read it. It's written in very simple words but very moving words by the great democratic poet Walt Whitman, who belonged to the 19th century. So this was written in 1865, just after the death of assassination of uh, the president Abraham Lincoln. "Oh Captain, My Captain." So when I read this poem at the feet of my father was teaching the poem in the class, and I was spellbound. And he himself became so emotional that he was almost moved to the tears, and the whole class was almost weeping while he was teaching this poem in the class. I never went to the country of Abraham Lincoln. I never saw his land, but this poem made me feel as if I had lost a very dear man, a very close relative of mine. So this is how I felt then. I felt as if I have lost a very close relative. So at the when the class was over, I was almost in tears when my father taught this poem. So I wanted to know why anybody would uh, want to kill such a good and great man who managed to win such a great war and who had to cross such gigantic hurdles, who had to face so much difficulties. The the book that I read just now and where I got my answer about the motive of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, This book, is written by Dale Carnegie, and this book was written in 1832. Sorry, 1932. This book, Lincoln the Unknown. Lincoln the Unknown by Dale Carnegie was written in 1932, and it is probably his first book. And for writing this book, Lincoln read almost all the biographies that were available then, and he has written about those aspects, the personal life, the unknown aspect of his personality, his relation with his wife, his relation with his generals, uh, the agonies that he suffered in personal life, his relation with his children, the how fond a father he was, and how his son died, and how he didn't want to go home even though the office hours were over, because he dreaded the presence of his wife. His wife was almost a mad woman. She was very ambitious. She belonged to a higher strata of society. So, at one place, Dale Carnegie mentions uh, something which is very remarkable. Some statesman, someone said about Lincoln that the biggest tragedy of his life, Lincoln's life, was not his assassination, but his marriage to his wife, who was ambitious, who didn't understand him, or he didn't appreciate him while he was alive. But it is very strange that after Lincoln was dead, this lady, who was a thorn in his neck, throughout his life, and who made his life so wretched, who made him feel bad throughout her married life, throughout his married life. This lady kept on weeping for about 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, the wife of Lincoln continued weeping and mourning the death of her husband, with whom she fought every day on very small matters. And she was a perverse lady who used to insult him in front of his senators, in front of his generals, and was jealous of any woman coming near him, even for official purpose, and she always wanted to dictate terms. And it is a strange thing to learn from this book that Lincoln would used to address his wife in an old-fashioned way. He used to call his wife mother, address his wife as mother. And when Lincoln had to go to some party, he would ask first the permission of his wife, who are the ladies he should talk with. And she would, give a sort of a list of the ladies that he was permitted to talk to. He was not permitted to talk to ladies who were very good looking and who were very dynamic in personality. So such was the jealousy and meanness of his wife. And this aspect, tragic aspect of Lincoln's life, his personal relationship with his wife, uh, who uh, I mean, did not appreciate him, did not love him deeply, who did not respect him for his great courage, vision, leadership qualities. She never understood him. She never respected him. That was the biggest tragedy of Lincoln's life, his failed marriage. His assassination was not the biggest tragedy. It was his failed marriage that was his biggest tragedy. Namaskar, friends.